Hey everyone, tonight we are not going to Athens, not to the land of poetry, philosophy, and the clinking of wine cups under moonlight. No, tonight you're stepping into a place where the word gentle doesn't exist in the dictionary, a place where softness is a flaw, and emotion is a disease you train yourself not to spread. We're going to Sparta, a city-state where even the pillows are made of stone, where your birth isn't welcomed with kisses, but with a cold stare checking if you're strong enough to survive, where if you cry, no one wipes your tears, they wipe their sword before we begin. If you somehow find this a cozy little hideout for late night hours, hit the like button and subscribe, but only if you truly want to. No pressure, like the rule in ancient taverns. You only come in when you need a quiet spot or a drink till dawn. And you know what I love most? Seeing the comments and knowing where you're watching from and what time it is, whether it's New York or Norway, 1 a.m. or 5 in the morning, you're still here, and I see you. Now dim the lights, turn on a little fan if you have one, not for the heat, but because white noise makes you feel safer. You don't remember how you got here. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe it was one of those especially aggressive bouts of insomnia. But here you are, Sparta, 435 BCE. More specifically, lying on what Spartans call a bed, and what you'd call a slightly flatter rock among other rocks. No mattress, no pillow, no one saying goodnight, just a scrap of coarse wool cloak thinner than the mercy in this city-state, and a faint, chilly breath from the stone-cold earth. Outside, it's not even dawn, but inside the barracks, you hear a sword tapping lightly against the wooden wall. Once, then twice. Not music. It's the wake-up call. And in Sparta, wake-ups are never gentle. You try to squeeze your eyes shut for just one more second, and instantly, a bare foot kicks into your ribs. It doesn't hurt much, but enough to tell you, every second you're not ready is a second the enemy moves forward. Who said that? No one. It's just a feeling in the air. You are 12 years old, which means you've been deemed old enough to begin the agoge, what Athenians call child abuse and Spartans call education. You were taken from your parents at age 7. No explanations, no goodbyes. You remember that day, vaguely. The ground was hot, the wind smelled like freshly cut wheat, and your mother's shadow stretched long across the dirt porch. She didn't cry. Neither did you. Because everyone knew crying wouldn't change the council's decision. A strange man came, dressed in a red cloak, face blank, hands large and cold like stone. He didn't ask permission. Didn't take your hand. He just grabbed your collar like lifting a sack of underweight grain. You turned back, not to beg, just for one last look, and saw your mother, still watching, unmoving. Her face stiff like the statue of Artemis at the Eastern Temple. Only her hand trembled slightly, and her eyes seemed to say, if you don't come back in glory, then don't come back at all. Every child here has the same look, not afraid, but no longer waiting for someone to care. They don't play, they don't whisper. They sit just far enough apart not to touch, but not so far as to seem strange. The silence isn't because there's nothing to say, but because there's nothing worth saying. You learn to speak with your shoulders, your eyes, and the bruises still fresh from yesterday's drills. Here, the official language isn't Greek. It's silence, the kind that has weight, shape, and sometimes smells like iron. Some nights, you lie next to another boy, only a breath apart. Both of you stare up at the wooden ceiling. No one moves, no one asks, "Do you miss your mother?" Because in Sparta, longing has no shelter. It has to learn to sleep sitting up, or vanish like cooking smoke in the evening. You open your eyes in a state that can't really be called tired, because to be tired, you need to have rested. You can't call it alert either. You simply exist, like a small pebble among gravel. No one notices. No one picks you up. Your neck aches dully, like a baby goat spent the night using you as a footrest and grinding its teeth in its sleep. Your wool tunic still smells like stove ash, mixed with a bit of dried sweat from days ago, a scent that has become Sparta's default perfume. You curl up, not because of the cold, but out of survival reflex. In Sparta, you've learned this. Anything that sticks out gets hit first. Next to you is another child. He's sleeping sideways, chin almost touching the ground. There's a small scrape on his forehead, probably from yesterday's fall during stone run training. You look at him for a moment, then turn away. Not because you don't care, but because here, any look longer than 3 seconds might be misread as a challenge. The rock beneath your back, aka the bed, hasn't moved. It's the one solid thing in a world constantly trying to knock you over. And in a strange way, you feel grateful for it. At least it doesn't hit you. At least it doesn't need you to be stronger in order to exist. It just needs you to endure. And in Spartan life, that's the least painful expectation you can hope for from anything. You push yourself up. Your muscles sting like they've been stung by an ancient Greek bee, the kind that swears all along your spine. You don't groan. No one groans here. If you groan, the kid next to you might just pull out a leather strap and help you wake up properly. Above, the sky hasn't brightened, but the ground is already awake. And you, a 12-year-old child with no parents, no pillow, no name except your training ID, are about to start a new day by surviving. You exhale softly. That breath, in Spartan air, sounds like a prayer, not to Zeus, but to the rock beneath your back. Thanks for not being too cold last night. And please don't crack today. The bed doesn't hug. It's not soft, not warm, not dreamy. But it doesn't shame you for being weak. It doesn't laugh when you curl up during your first night because you miss your mother. It doesn't yell in your face that if you're still crying, you're not worthy of being a warrior. It just lies there, enduring with you. You think, if there's anyone in Sparta you've ever rested your head on without being punished, it's this rock. Maybe that's why, every morning before you rise, you always place a hand on that cold, hard surface for a moment. Not to check if it's still there, but to let it know that you still are, in a world where you're not allowed to remember, not allowed to care, not allowed to soften. An unfeeling rock becomes the quietest witness to your humanity. You stand up slowly, as if not wanting to hurt the ground, not because you're gentle, but because every muscle has learned to translate movement into one word. Don't stretch, don't strain, don't express, because here, the only thing allowed to be shown is results. You shake off your tunic, kick away a few pieces of straw clinging to your legs. No blanket, no sandals, just skin, bones, and gravel. Everything else you have to forge for yourself. A child nearby wakes up. He looks at you, doesn't greet. You don't greet either. Because in Sparta, every day starts with pretending not to see each other until you're forced into combat. You step away from your sleeping spot, if you can even call it that, and greet the morning with cracked feet shaped by stone and silence. No one wakes you up. You have to know. Here, lateness is rewarded with a whip. You hear the sound of fabric scraping against skin, wooden shoes brushing softly over gravel. Small sounds, but enough to make your heart beat half a notch faster. Because in Sparta, the one sound you fear most is approaching footsteps. Every child knows, if you're still awake enough to hear, you're still alive. And being alive, here, means training, even with an empty stomach, stinging eyes, and a throat as dry as if you've never tasted water. You still have to step out into the yard, waiting for sticks and commands. No one asks, "Are you ready?" Because Sparta doesn't wait for your readiness. Sparta waits to see if you fall before or after your comrades. You step into the yard. The early morning breeze slips through the folds of your tunic, like it's checking if you're skinny enough to be excused from bathing. No water basin, no towels, no concept of soap that smells like olives. In Sparta, the idea of bathing means sweating just enough for the dirt to fall off. And if someone actually pours water on you, it probably means you're being punished. You grab a handful of fine sand and rub it on your hands, as if scrubbing away something. Not dirt, but the memory of once being clean. Another child spits into his hand and wipes it gently over his face, like he's applying moisturizer made from the will to survive. Some days, you forget what your body actually smells like, because sweat, smoke, ash, and dried blood have become your personal brand. The first day you arrived here, you blushed because someone smelled bad. Now, you'd blush if you didn't smell bad enough to be considered trying hard. In Sparta, body odor is how people recognize each other. Not by name, not by face, not by voice, just passing by. You know, that's the boy who trained with the staff yesterday until his hand split open 3 times. And that one just got doused in ash after losing a match. No one wrinkles their nose. No one steps back, because stepping back is a kind of weakness. And Sparta doesn't forgive noses more sensitive than willpower. You've gotten so used to it, you can recognize the smell of fear. It's not obvious, but it always lingers at the collar of the kid about to be called up. No one complains, because everyone's the same. Here, smell isn't a reason to be avoided, it's a survival badge. You bend down to retie the leather strap around your calf, which doubles as a tie, a washcloth, and a backup weapon in case someone tries to steal your meal. You used to hate this strap. It's stiff, rough, and always smells like 3 days without sleep. But now, you find yourself touching it every morning as if checking whether you're still you. In a place where no one's allowed to keep anything soft. An old piece of leather becomes the only spiritual relic you dare to hold on to. It has no color. It has no name. But it has history. You remember the first time you used it to wipe blood. Not yours, but your friend's. After a staff blow to the forehead. You didn't cry, but your hand shook, and you cleaned it thoroughly, so no one would know you were afraid. Since that day, the leather strap became the one thing here that understands the secrets you don't dare say out loud. Water is rare, but willpower is not. So instead of finding ways to clean your body, you learn to assume you're clean, as long as you can still walk, and you walk. Through the smell of sun, people, and Sparta, in a society where fresh is considered suspicious luxury, no one praises you for looking neat. The best compliment you'll get is, you look like you could take another morning beating. And in Sparta, that's a perfectly decent good morning. You've heard stories about Athens, where people have public bathhouses and are scrubbed with soapy bubbles and gentle hands. There, people treat the body like part of the soul. But in Sparta, people treat enduring the body as part of the training. You don't look in mirrors, not because there aren't any, but because mirrors only reflect things that can change. And your face doesn't. It's been hardened by waterless mornings, blood wiped with sand, and scrapes no one asks about. And then, after tightening the strap and patting your stomach, not to eat, but to remind yourself you're still alive, you take a deep breath. The morning air carries the smell of skin, old straw, and threat. You're ready now. Ready not to fall, at least until noon. Somewhere in the corner of the yard, someone coughs, a dry, tiny sound, but enough to make the group pause slightly. In Sparta, the sick aren't seen as weak, but as concerning. Because if you get others sick, you might be pulled from the team. And being removed from the team means a day when no one looks at you, no one hits you, no one calls your name. It means you're no longer part of Sparta. So you lift your head a little higher, square your back a little straighter, and walk faster toward the training yard, hoping someone sees you. Just one glance is enough to know. I still exist in this silent test. You walk toward the breakfast area, if you can even call it that. A bumpy corner of the yard, a few blackened iron pots, and something bubbling like it's screaming, "I'm not food." That's black broth, a Spartan specialty no one dares to remember the smell of. A legendary mixture of pig's blood, vinegar, salt, and meat scraps, cooked long enough for all hope to melt along with the fat. You grab a bowl, actually half an old helmet, and scoop yourself a portion. It's not hot, not fragrant, doesn't soothe your growling stomach, but it contains enough iron to help you forget your feelings. Every spoonful is a challenge. Every breath is an effort not to throw up. But you eat anyway, not because you like it, but because if you don't eat, you'll have nothing to vomit after training. You remember once asking your trainer, "Why can't we have bread or cheese?" He looked at you like you just asked, "Why don't we crawl back into the womb?" Warriors don't eat things that make people happy. You gave a forced smile. Because you realized it was true. A kid next to you gags quietly after the first sip. No one turns around. No one helps. This is Sparta, where you may collapse, but you're never allowed to be visibly weak. You scoop another spoonful, thicker, bitterer, and warm, suspiciously so. You don't ask, because the answer might make it unswallowable. Breakfast doesn't end with a bell. It ends with a look from the instructor, a look that says, "Done. Now it's the stick's turn." You stand up. Your bowl still has residue at the bottom. Your stomach floats somewhere between survival and torture. But you walk. No head bowed, no mouth wiped. Because in Sparta, you don't eat to live, you eat to endure living. You place the bowl, no, the old helmet, back on the ground. It makes no sound. But you feel like something echoes up from its bottom. Swallow faster next time. In that brief moment, you wonder, if you were ever given a real meal, would you still be able to fight? Would joy make your legs go soft? You glance at the child next to you. He's still sitting, his face greener than the morning sky. You want to pat his shoulder, but then you remember, here, hands are only raised to strike or block. And so, you walk away with a stomach still empty and a head already bracing for more sticks. Because Sparta doesn't need you full, Sparta needs you on your feet. There's no whistle, no coach in sunglasses counting reps for you. Just a stick and an adult, expressionless face, steady hands, waiting for you to make your first mistake of the day. You haven't even digested the black broth, but your feet are already in line. No one says good job, only not painful enough. The first strike lands, not on you, but on the kid next to you, for yawning. The stick hits his shoulder, a dry, decisive sound, like a rejection. You feel relieved, because it wasn't you, but also worried, because it could be you next. Training begins with running, on stone, no shoes. Then comes carrying a wooden shield, almost as heavy as you are. You must take the hits, but you're not allowed to dodge. Dodging is weakness, and weakness gets fixed. Fixed with a stick. You don't ask. How long is this session? Because in Sparta, training ends when someone can't get up anymore. Your body doesn't hurt in parts, it hurts as a whole. That's when you understand. Here, no one cares where it hurts, only that you're not lying down. The kid at the top of the group today gets a reward, a piece of dry bread. The one at the bottom also gets a reward, another lap. You're in the middle, a safe spot, but forgettable. And in Sparta, being forgettable is just as dangerous as being hated. Amid sweat and dust, among screams, broken breaths, and the thwack of wood hitting wood, you used to think pain was a signal to stop. In Sparta, pain is the signal that you're doing it right. Once, you twisted your ankle but had to keep running, because stopping would turn you into a live demo for the others. No one asks, "Are you okay?" Only, "Still running?" No? Then, crawl. You suddenly realize you're still standing. No one praises you. No one pats your shoulder. No drum roll. No flags. Just that. No one is looking at you with disappointment. And somehow, That's enough to make you feel good enough not to be cast out of the pack. In Sparta, sometimes the greatest reward is being allowed to keep suffering. And to Sparta, that's an achievement. No certificate needed, no ceremony. Just don't fall. There was once a kid who broke his arm during training and didn't scream. You asked him later if it hurt. He said, "So what if it hurts? Does screaming make it better?" You had no answer. And from that day, you too learned to count bruises by breath, not by tears. You enter the sparring ring, where there are no helmets, no rules, and no such thing as take it easy. You don't know who you'll fight today. You just know that when your name is called, someone will step forward, and that person has zero reason to hold back. The call to begin rings out. You charge in, no thinking. First swing, misses. Second, hits your cheek. It burns. It's sudden, but no one's surprised because everyone's been punched in the face. You stumble, but don't fall, and that's when the whole yard goes quiet. Then a voice shouts, "Good." Not because you fought well, but because you took the hit. In Sparta, no one teaches you how to dodge. They teach you how to take the blow without breaking your spirit. There was a kid once who smiled when his tooth came out after a kick. He didn't cry. He didn't curse. He just picked up the tooth, pocketed it, and kept fighting. You don't find that crazy anymore. You find it admirable. The match ends. You didn't win. You didn't lose. Because here, points mean less than how many times you get back up. An adult walks over, places a hand on your shoulder. No squeeze, no words, just a touch. But that's how they congratulate you for crossing a threshold. The point where you know you don't break easily. No one says anything to you after the fight. No lessons, no technique breakdown. Just a bruise heating up on your left cheek and a strange feeling in your chest. Not pride, not pain, just a sense of survival. You begin to understand what they don't say out loud. In Sparta, a warrior isn't someone who knows how to fight, but someone who knows how to take a hit without losing who they are. And from today, you start to accept not everyone who hits you is your enemy, and not every blow is meant to break you. Some cultures have coming-of-age rituals. Sparta has your first punch to the face, not to hurt you, but so you'll remember, from now on, no one will protect you from reality. After the match, you smile faintly, not because you're happy, but because now I'm officially part of the wolf pack. Your first fight teaches you something no book ever did. Fear doesn't disappear, it just learns to shut up. After each hit, your brain doesn't run away anymore. It learns to update its software. This one didn't kill me, so ignore. And so, you walk off the ring, bruised cheek, swollen eye, but chin up and a mind quieter than it's ever been. You hear the sound of footsteps hitting the ground. Not fast, not heavy, but steady and firm. That sound doesn't come from soldiers. It comes from women. In Sparta, women are not the weaker sex. They are the reason you don't dare skip training. The first woman you see this morning is the mother of one of the boys in your group. She stands watching the entire session, saying nothing. Arms crossed, occasionally, nodding. You think she's proud, until she says, Next time you block that slow, I won't bother watching. And that child nods like he just received a prize. Spartan women don't sew, don't shy away, don't guard their virtue. They shout during festivals. They compete in sports. They ride horses and throw javelins. And when you, a boy, come home bruised and exhausted, the one who greets you isn't your mum with a bowl of soup. It's your sister, sharpening her sword, asking, "Still alive? Good. Tomorrow it's your turn to fight me." You used to think men are warriors. In Sparta, you realize women are the standard you're expected to meet. One day, you'll go to war. And if you die, the only Spartan woman who'll cry for you won't be your mother. It will be the wife of the man who killed you. Because the pain of failure is always greater than the pain of loss. Once, you heard your father say your mother beat him in a javelin contest, not in their youth. But last week, he wasn't mad. He laughed, showing off the scar on his shoulder like a trophy. In Sparta, getting hit by your wife isn't a shame. It's a privilege. Because not everyone is worthy of being hit by a woman. Spartan women don't need to shout. They just look at you. A single glance when you mess up a drill hurts more than a whack with a stick, because that look says, "I expect more from a warrior," and you know, you just disgraced your bloodline. In Athens, women are taught to dance, embroider, and write poetry. In Sparta, women are taught how to birth warriors and teach them how to take a beating. You once saw your friend's grandmother punch him in the chest when he complained of a headache, not to heal him, but to remind him, if your head's whining, it means your heart's still not brave enough. You don't eat lunch. You resolve a short-term survival event with the speed of someone being hunted. Food is handed out like a hostage exchange. You get a piece of rough bread, a bit of cheese, and sometimes, if the gods are in a good mood, a fig. You don't even get to take the second bite before. The training whistle blows. Someone dropped their shield. The whole group gets called to the yard. No one speaks. No one complains. Everyone gives up their meal because one person couldn't keep quiet. You learn something. In Sparta, lunch isn't for recovery. It's for testing whether you've let your guard down. Some days, you're mid-chew when someone grabs you by the collar for an emergency drill. Other days, you're left alone, but have to share your food with an injured teammate, not out of pity, but because he's still alive, so he still needs strength to bear the pain. So you eat half your portion, hungry, but not objecting. Because here, sharing isn't a moral lesson, it's survival instinct. You learn to put away your dagger while eating. Not because of enemies, but because sometimes your teammates are hungrier than you. And not everyone manages hunger in civilized ways. Once, you saw two boys attack each other over a piece of cheese. The trainer didn't intervene. He just said, "Whoever survives deserves lunch." And you realize, in Sparta, food doesn't nourish you. It tests whether you deserve to be nourished. Eventually, you can't tell if today's bread is any different from yesterday's. They're so similar you wonder, did someone design it that way? So you'd never expect anything. No one complains. No one critiques the food. Not because it's good, but because Complaining doesn't make the bread thicker, it just wastes energy talking. And when you finally get to bite into the last piece, you eat it like it's a sacred moment. A tiny island of peace in the trench of training. A reward you dare not drop, because you know it won't come again. You don't eat near anyone who stares at you for more than 3 seconds. In Sparta, that stare isn't about affection. It's someone calculating. If I attacked, could I steal their food? So, losing half a loaf is okay, as long as you keep both your ears. One day, you give your fig to an injured teammate. He doesn't thank you. He just looks at you and whispers, "If you get called for night drills, don't drink from the east well." And just like that, you survive the mass diarrhea attack that hits the whole squad. You lose the fig, but gain one more day alive. In Sparta, fair trade isn't about stuff. It's about survival intel. You live with 20 others, sleep pressed together like sardines, eat together like comrades, but none of them are your friends in the way you used to know. No arm around the shoulder, no story sharing, no bro or sis here. In Sparta, communication is minimal. Relationships are about order. Everyone has a place, a task, and their own distinct silence. You learn when to lower your head, when to step aside, and when to keep your mouth shut. Once, you laughed because the kid next to you slipped while carrying water. 3 minutes later, you were called out to the yard and made to do push-ups until you threw up. Not for laughing, but for disrupting formation. You thought living in a group meant becoming closer. In Sparta, living in a group teaches you not to rely on anyone, not even yourself. You eat together, train together, sleep together. But the only shared feeling is the tightness of discipline. And when someone messes up, the whole group gets punished. No one blames him. They just look at him differently. That look says, if you don't fix yourself, we'll all be dragged down. No shouting, no scolding. Here, order doesn't need words, just the right look at the right time. Once, you had a fever, shivering through the night. No one asked. The next morning, someone threw you a half-burned piece of cloth to keep warm. No words were spoken, but survival was acknowledged in silence. In Sparta, everyone knows you're not okay, but accepting it is how you become okay. You don't remember who got you through your first winter, but you clearly remember the kid who did 500 push-ups with you during a group punishment. There was no hug, no thank you. Just a short look, like, I took the hit with you, that's enough. In Sparta, bonds don't come from sharing, but from enduring together. You don't have your own bed. No personal belongings, no nicknames. But you leave behind one thing, standards. The way you fold your blanket, the way you never drop your spoon. And when you leave, no one says your name. But the next person still has to do it exactly how you did. In Sparta, the only thing that remains after you is discipline. Not memories, no blackboard, no pens, no bell to signal the end of class. In Sparta, your first teacher isn't a mentor, it's your teacher's fist. Welcome to the Agoge, the most famous youth training program in the ancient world, where the first lesson is, if you don't want to learn, you'll learn through pain. You don't study history, no literature. You learn how to endure. Every time you fall, no one helps you up. Every time you say ouch, you're forced to hold it in, to learn how not to disrupt the formation with your whining. The teacher doesn't grade you with ink, he grades with a cold stare. And the test is, did he break his arm without making a sound? You learn to swallow your tears like you swallow blood, not because you're good, but because if you can't do it, you're not worthy of being a soldier. And there's one secret test, not written anywhere. When you get hit, you're not allowed to hate the one who hit you, because if you do, you've let emotion cloud your duty, and that is unforgivable in Sparta. Here, the only person you're allowed to hate is yourself, if you're not good enough. No one teaches you to write your name, but everyone knows who you are when you get hit and don't cry. Reputation in Sparta isn't etched in letters, but in scars, in the way you fall, and in the absolute silence when pain makes it impossible to stand. No one needs to remember your name, but everyone remembers the silence you made when your teeth hit the ground. The teacher doesn't need to yell, doesn't need to curse. He just stands there, holding a wooden stick, and looks. And you know, when he looks long enough, someone's going to fall. Could be you, could be today. That look teaches you more than 100 moral lessons. It says, silence is survival. You don't raise your hand for permission. You don't ask again if you don't understand. Because asking again means you weren't focused enough to get it the first time. And that is failure. You learn by watching, by predicting the next move, by standing in the right place before anyone orders you to. You think Spartans don't believe in gods? Wrong. They do. But in their own way. In Sparta, gods don't float on clouds, waving hands to bless. They wear armor, they stand beside the trenches, and they do not smile. Ares, the god of war, is the only one mentioned as often as an imaginary comrade. You pray to him not to be blessed, but to don't die stupid. No one asks the gods to bring peace. Here, even hope smells like rusted iron and sweat. There are temples, there are rituals, but no grand celebrations. The fire is lit, not for singing, but to expose the weak. You kneel, but you do not lower yourself. You offer, but you do not beg. You pray, but you're not allowed to cry. Because if Sparta's gods are watching, they're also judging your posture. And if your hands tremble while you pray, maybe you're not worthy of surviving. Here, spirit is armor, and faith is the first weapon you must forge. Someone once asked, if we die, do the gods grieve? Another shrugged. If they're sad, why do they let you train with a broken spear? In Sparta, the answer isn't in the prayer. It's in who's still breathing after the drill. There's no God appeared and helped you win. If you win, people say, guess Ares was okay with it. And if you lose, maybe he's testing your courage in defeat. In Sparta, faith doesn't help you win. It just keeps you from blaming anyone. Every morning, you touch your sword, like touching a reminder. If you die today, don't die forgotten. And when you pray to Ares, you don't ask to survive, you ask to die in order. In Sparta, belief won't save you from death. but it will make sure your death means something. No one calls nighttime in Sparta rest time. It's just when the sun's tired, but you're still not allowed to fall. You come back after a day of being hitting back, practicing how to hold your breath, pretending not to be hungry, pretending not to be scared. You sit, or rather collapse onto the stone floor you once called your resting spot. Your body doesn't need a pillow now. It needs an apology from the training schedule. No lights, only moonlight slipping through wall cracks, landing right on a bruise that's turning darker. And you realize, night is when you take inventory of what's still intact. Fingers, still there. Ankle, off, but not broken. Pride, temporarily lost. Will retrieve later. You don't speak. But your mind whispers to itself, I didn't fall in front of them. Tomorrow, I'll fall less. And as part of an unspoken ritual, you take a long breath. Inhale the pain, exhale the grit, and then you sleep. No dreams, no lullaby, just the sound of blood still flowing beneath raw skin, and silence, like a Spartan blanket draped over you each night. You don't realize you're growing up until pain no longer makes you flinch. At first, you counted every wound. Then, you only counted what still worked. And one day, you notice you no longer react to pain. You just acknowledge it. You aren't hugged. You aren't comforted. But someone lies closer to you than usual, like wild animals sharing breath to not freeze. In Sparta, warmth is the only thing you can share, without being seen as weak. You used to be angry for not being as fast as the kid next to you, but tonight, as you touch your aching knee, you whisper, you tried. I know. In Sparta, even gratitude has to be learned between bruises. You think you're asleep, but in truth, only your muscles rest, your mind is still on guard. In Sparta, sleep is not for relaxation. It's when the body stitches torn pieces, and the spirit rehearses one last time for the nightmare called tomorrow. You turn, not from soreness, but as a reflex to the sound of dry leaves outside. You furrow your brow because you dreamed of metal hitting stone. You wake, but your eyes stay shut because you've grown used to living in the dark. No one wakes you up because Sparta doesn't raise those who need an alarm. You rise, not because you're rested, but because imagined footsteps in your mind whisper, you're still alive, so you better be ready. In darkness thick like clay, you see a memory again. The first time you held a broken spear. The first fall with no one there to catch you. And your hand, bleeding but steady. You sleep without dreams, but the sound of weapons has settled in your heart. It doesn't scream. It doesn't shine. It just murmurs each night. Tomorrow morning, you and I fight again. You don't sleep alone. You sleep beside the name you must become. At night, you don't see your face, only a version of yourself you haven't reached yet, and you understand. Each night is a meeting with yourself to make sure you don't falter at dawn. The weak often fear the dark, but here, darkness doesn't hide you from fear. It makes you look it in the eye, and if you tremble, you learn to tremble silently. There's no mother's voice, no hand stroking your forehead, only a dry whisper inside your head. Tomorrow, if you fall, Make it a beautiful fall. In Sparta, willpower is the only blanket you have, and you must weave it every night. Morning in Sparta doesn't begin with light. It begins with absence, an empty space in the line, a breath that doesn't echo back, a name not called, but everyone knows. In Sparta, sorrow is not to be wept. It's to be stood through, eye to eye, in silence. When someone falls, they are not buried with glory. They are remembered by shield banging in the night. Their names aren't carved on graves. Their names are carved inside the shields of the living, as a way of saying, I haven't fallen because you once stood. No eulogy, no flowers, only blood left on the sand, and one step firmer than before. In Sparta, the ones who are gone are the reason the living walk straighter. A warrior may drop their spear, may lose their helmet, but never the shield, because when you drop that, you drop the name of the one who came before you. You run, you fall, you rise again. And sometimes you hear a whisper, keep going. It's not your imagination, because Sparta never leaves anyone walk it alone, not even the dead. You want to cry, but if you do, the one beside you will have to be strong for you. And here, making someone else carry your burden is the sin no one dares to commit. So you swallow your tears, the way you once swallowed blood, to keep standing. You've survived a day in Sparta, and if you're still breathing, then congratulations. You're not okay, but you're still alive. Tonight, you have no blanket, no scented candle, no lullaby. Only your own breath and the memory of every blow you took today. You don't need to forgive yourself, because here, no one has ever seen themselves weak and been forgiven. You just need to remember tomorrow, there's still a place for you in the line. If you want to fall, fall into your own hands. If you want to cry, cry in silence to save strength for tomorrow's scream. You don't need a peaceful sleep. You need a place where no one asks, are you okay? But still stands beside you anyway. And if you dream of sunlight hitting the crest of your helmet. Dream of a day when no one is left behind. Dream of your name carved on the shield of the one who comes next as a passing torch. Next story, Demeter, goddess of agriculture and harvest. You wake up to find yourself standing in the middle of a golden wheat field. No phone, no Wi-Fi, just the sound of wind brushing through the wheat stalks and a woman watching you. She says nothing. But you immediately understand. If you pull out the wrong wheat stalk, you'll get 3 years of drought. That's Demeter, goddess of agriculture, mother of the harvest. And the reason why ancient Greeks offered honey cakes instead of ranting on Twitter. Demeter isn't the noisy type of goddess. No lightning bolts, no tsunamis, no shape-shifting into an eagle to seduce women like Zeus. She just holds a bundle of wheat. But if she gets angry, the plains go dry like unfinished homework. Morning. Wake up before dawn, not to jog, but to talk to the earth. She presses her ear to the grass, as if the soil is telling her about last night's dreams. Noon. Teaching villagers how to farm, sow seeds, water in sync with the lunar cycle. Someone asks why water by moon phases. She smiles, because plants have cycles, and humans have time cards. Afternoon. Walking across the fields, where she walks, flowers bloom. Where she stands, the roots sigh. Evening. Sitting by the fire, eating honey-dipped wheat cakes, silently gazing south, where a daughter is being held underground. Poseidon commands the sea, Zeus commands the sky, Hades commands the underworld. But Demeter, she commands the roots, while the other gods fight for power, talk big, hurl lightning and waves. Demeter stands on the sidelines, holding a small shovel, teaching people how to make garden beds. The world doesn't collapse from the lack of a thunder god, but from the absence of someone who knows how to keep the wheat standing against the eastern wind. Demeter doesn't need a throne. What she has is a bundle of wheat in hand, the cornucopia of abundance, and 2 snakes wrapped around her wrists like Mother Earth's jewelry. The poppies in her hand aren't for decoration. They're lullabies for the earth in winter, and sometimes to lull herself to sleep in the nights without Persephone. The people of Eleusis offer her honey cakes each year, not because it's tradition, but because they know if they don't, the next season there'll be nothing to bake with. When villagers ask, "What's your favorite offering?" Demeter just smiles, says nothing. She places a stalk of wheat on the ground, and next season that spot grows tall up to the village chief's knee. Demeter is a mother who doesn't need to cry rivers, just her silence. And the earth cracks open. People remember her not for power, but because she's the only one who dared to love someone more than the world itself. When Persephone vanished, Demeter didn't go mad. She just stopped working, and winter began. A mother holding wheat in hand, a harvest waiting for a daughter's return, and a world holding its breath, afraid to make her sad for even one more day. You think love between gods is poetic, full of light and verse. No. It usually starts with rain, a damp field, and Zeus in some ambiguous form. Demeter didn't need a romantic serenade. She needed seeds to sprout, soil with enough water, sunlight on time. But when Zeus showed up with that just dropping by smile, everyone on Olympus knew something would come of it. And of course, no wedding, no rituals, just a quiet spring, and a belly starting to swell like a field near harvest. Demeter, titan of harvest, kept working, still sewing with her hands, eyes on the horizon, and every time she sighed, somewhere, land flooded. Demeter didn't know she was becoming a mother. No signs, no prophecy, no wedding bells, just an afternoon of rain, the smell of freshly ploughed soil, and Zeus with a smile that's never a good omen. Then her belly grew. No one asked. No one prepared. Hestia offered a cloth. Hera watched from afar as if counting the days until this all gets forgotten. Demeter kept tilling. Hands ploughing, feet walking, belly full. Every time she had morning sickness, there was lightning in Thessaly. Every time she vomited, Sparta had hailstorms. The villagers didn't get it. They burned mugwort. They prayed to Apollo. But no one guessed. A titan was having pregnancy cravings. And when Persephone was born, the earth gave a gentle shudder, like it had just exhaled. A life not welcomed with trumpets, just flowers blooming around her cradle. But not everyone was happy. Zeus disappeared, as usual. Hera got jealous, in a quiet, terrifying way. Athena pretended to read but watched every detail. Poseidon still had no idea what was going on. Demeter blamed no one. She just cared for her child. But from that day, she started to believe in silence, because love that doesn't speak can still make flowers bloom and send Olympus into winter. In those first days, Persephone lay in her mother's arms, sleeping peacefully like a seed not yet cracked. Demeter didn't teach her to speak first or walk first. She taught her to touch flowers, listen to wind, and feel the sorrow when earth cracked dry. Persephone grew up among soft grass, golden wheat, and the song of warblers. But even then, something strange began. Every place the little girl passed, flowers bloomed wildly, even on stone. Zeus saw it from afar, and he knew his daughter didn't just carry divine blood. She carried something that even the underworld would want to bloom for. Persephone wasn't Greek beauty queen pretty with olive skin and a yogurt commercial smile. No, she was beautiful in the way that made the earth split open to let flowers grow in her steps. She was born into a cracked world where her mother was angry at Olympus and her father wasn't there. And because of that, she didn't learn to smile to be loved. She learned to be quiet and to make people plant flowers hoping she'd pass by again. Every morning, Persephone strolled through meadows. She didn't pick flowers, she made them bloom. She didn't need silk dresses. The wind stitched soft hems from the scent of wild grass. She didn't wear lipstick because pomegranates ripened at her laugh. Demeter was in a panic. Every time her daughter smiled at a flower, she planted 3 more hectares of wheat just to shift public focus. "She's still a child," she shouted at Athena. "Don't write poetry about her." But it was too late. Olympus had started whispering. Hera raised an eyebrow. "Another of Zeus's strays?" Aphrodite sighed. "Let's hope she doesn't steal my spotlight." Artemis readied her arrows just in case. Hades didn't fall in love at first sight, but he saw her and knew his world would never be silent again. He was standing in his underworld palace when Persephone appeared in the reflection of the sticks, a frame with no color, no scent, no sound. But she had all of it: sunlight, the scent of wind, and a laugh that made even headless souls turn around. He looked at Hermes and asked, "Go see, who left sunlight in my garden?" Hermes flew up and came back, saying, "Not sunlight, the daughter of earth and harvest." Persephone knew nothing, still playing with cicadas, painting breezes on river surfaces, and making grape clusters turn from green to red just by sitting nearby. She didn't try to draw attention, but that's exactly why no one, god or mortal, could look away. Apollo nearly missed a note when she walked past the lyre garden. Dionysus accidentally turned wine into vinegar. Athena looked up from her book 3 times in the same afternoon. Even Artemis, who never smiled, chuckled slightly when Persephone blew dandelions into the wind. Or that Demeter watched from afar, sighing, "This girl is going to cause consequences." Persephone didn't know she was the center of attention. And that was the most dangerous part. She didn't try to be loved, admired, or chosen. She just lived in a way that made the universe adjust its heartbeat. Demeter once said, "Beauty that doesn't know it's beautiful is the easiest to pluck." But Persephone only smiled. "I don't want to be plucked. I want to grow roots." But from afar, Olympus was feverish, because there's a kind of beauty that doesn't need to be seen and still can't be forgotten. And there are powerful beings who, when faced with such beauty, are left with nothing but helplessness in their hearts and a kidnapping plan. Demeter saw it coming. Every time Persephone slept, she stood watch. Every time Persephone sang, she planted another fence. But no one can guard a girl's dreams. And no one can stop the stirring of a god who hasn't known love in eons. Persephone wasn't a victim. She was a sunbeam that wandered into the underworld, a bell ringing where souls had long forgotten spring. But because of that, she became the beginning of a heartbreaking deal between harvest and loss, between heaven and the underworld, between mother and husband. And it all started with one step toward a strange flower. That flower wasn't in any species Demeter had ever named. It was black like ink not yet dried, soft like a memory not yet put to rest. Persephone didn't mean to pick it. She just wanted to touch it. But the earth understood that gesture differently. The earth, used to darkness, shuddered at a single gentle stroke. And at the moment her fingertip brushed the petal, the ground split open. No scream, no light, just an opening, enough for a black chariot to rise, pulled by 4 horses whose hooves made no sound. And on that chariot was a god who had waited 1,000 years for sunlight. Some say Hades planned it, some say it was fate, but really, it was a crack formed by loneliness, not the sad, poetry-writing kind, but the kind of loneliness that makes stone crave footsteps every day. Hades looked up from the underworld, not hoping to see light, just hoping to see someone unafraid of the dark, and that day he saw not a goddess, not a princess, but a girl who dared to lay a hand on a flower no one had dared name. If you think kidnapping involves a villain with a beard, riding a black horse, laughing mwahaha, then think again. No fanfare, no plan, not even a hood. Persephone had just bent down to touch a black flower and hadn't yet decided whether it was gothic cute or a danger sign when the ground cracked open like a mirror struck by a rock. But below, everything was unintentionally prepared. Hades was sitting alone in the grand hall, a place where light couldn't reach, where time flowed without anyone needing to acknowledge it. In front of him was a blank sheet of paper, a dried olive branch, and an unspoken question. Would anyone come here unafraid? And at that moment, he felt something, not an earthquake, but a memory of light. The underworld shuddered, the earth opened, and he didn't have time to think. He just stood up, stepped onto the chariot, as if someone had pre-written this action into his spine. A chariot emerged. No one screamed, no one resisted, because it all happened in 3.5 seconds. Persephone vanished, and the flower still trembled. Hades, the god of the underworld, had just executed the worst kidnapping in the history of seasons. Couldn't hide the traces, couldn't erase the emotions, and worst of all, had no logistical plan. He only knew one thing. She was down here now. And he didn't want to let her go. Persephone, upon opening her eyes in the underworld, didn't cry. She sat up, looked around, and said just one sentence. "This isn't my garden." Hades, who thought he'd have to console her, awkwardly held a bouquet of plastic flowers suggested by Medusa, but she didn't look. She was listening to the darkness, the silence, the laments, and the truth. No one touched her. No one spoke to her as if she were weak. No one called her someone's daughter. Here, for the first time, she was just Persephone. And in that very moment, amidst the cracking sounds and silence, she found herself unafraid, not afraid of the underworld, not afraid of Hades, not afraid of herself. Freedom, it turns out, isn't about returning, but about stopping long enough to hear your own heartbeat in the dark. She didn't know how long she'd be here, only that, for the first time, fear didn't fill the entire room. But don't think this love story is cute. Demeter, upon discovering her daughter was missing, did something no one had dared. Before that, she had run through forests, knocked on every tree trunk, looked at every petal, asked every gust of wind. No answer. She entered the temple to ask Athena, and greeted no one. She went to Apollo and threatened to break all his strings. She flipped through the attendance book of all Olympus and asked, "Who was the last to see my daughter?" No one answered. And that's when she stopped speaking. She just acted. She made the sky stop raining. She made the earth stop sprouting. She turned the entire Mediterranean into a global hunger strike. "Return my daughter," just one sentence. And Olympus went into panic mode. An emergency meeting took place at Zeus's palace. On the right was Athena, trying to present a PowerPoint on Divine Charter, Clause 17b. No kidnapping the daughter of the nature's caretaker. On the left was Ares, banging his sword on the table like war drums. "Let me go down there. I'll pull Persephone back by hand." Apollo just said, "I've written a song about this. Anyone want to hear it?" Zeus was sweating. Poseidon pretended not to be involved. Aphrodite smiled vaguely. Who says you shouldn't love someone from the underworld? Finally, they looked to Hermes, the only one fast enough to deliver an invitation to Hades for a meeting, and the whole group sat waiting, like students who didn't do their homework, blaming the weather. Zeus, well, it was my oversight. Hermes, I didn't drive that chariot. Hades, I think I'm in love. And Persephone, she was sitting in the underworld garden, holding a pomegranate seed, wondering, how does spring grow in a place without sunlight? She looked at it, bright red, plump, as if it were the only thing daring to live here without fear of being called ugly. Not because she was hungry, not because she was forced. She ate because she wanted to understand. How could something bloom in hell? And at that moment, the pomegranate seed, not just a fruit, it was a decision. An answer that didn't need anyone's approval. And that, my friend, was when kidnapping turned into negotiation. But before they found an agreement, the world had to wither once. Not thunder, not war, not plague. The first thing that made the world crumble was a grieving mother funny. Demeter didn't scream or wail. She just stopped doing anything. Before that, she had walked away, not in divine light, but with bare feet, in the form of an old beggar woman. She knocked on every door, slept next to haystacks, asked for water at village wells, and everyone asked, "What are you looking for, Granny?" She replied, "A girl with hair like ripened wheat, with a voice that makes the insects go quiet." But no one knew. Only a child said, "I saw the field crying yesterday," and she understood. It was time to stop asking. It was time to make the world feel pain. No more rain, no more sprouting, no more songs for the rice in summer. She sat down, silent, and the world began to yellow, then crack, then groan in hunger. The fields whispered dreams that had never been harvested. The weeds refused to grow, like a child sulking because their mother didn't hug them to sleep. Corn twisted, trying to grow, but no lullaby came from the earth. Sunflowers still turned instinctively, but the sun seemed to have lost its way. With no one to lead it over the hills, all living things knew how to wait, but they didn't know who they were waiting for. Animals couldn't find seeds. Mortals lit fires to pray for harvests, but the goddess of agriculture didn't listen. The hills died young, the fields suffocated in their sleep, and Zeus began to worry. Not because of the people, but because no one was offering sacrifices anymore. Zeus sent Hermes to Demeter. "Sister, say something. It's just a love story." Demeter didn't look at him. She snapped a dry stalk of wheat in her hand. Hermes returned, looked at Zeus. "She isn't crying. She just won't let the world live anymore." On his way back, Hermes stopped by a dead branch with a bird's nest. A little sparrow sat there, not singing. Hermes joked, "Lost your voice?" The bird answered, in a language only the messenger god could hear. "There are no more songs to learn. Spring hasn't come. Who will teach me how to sing?" Hermes fell silent. For the first time, the fastest god in the world didn't know what message to carry back, because sometimes bad news doesn't need to be delivered. It grows by itself, like weeds in a wasteland. Children began to ask, "Mom, why is there no more spring?" And the mother replied, "Because another mother is looking for her child." And the story spread like poisonous mushrooms in a damp forest, not quickly, but unstoppable. The gods gathered again, for the second time. Hades was invited up, for the first time in 800 years. He wore black, of course, but this time he also wore silent gratitude. "She ate the pomegranate," he said. "Who forced her?" "No one. She chose it." Zeus scratched his head. Athena looked at Aphrodite. Aphrodite smiled. "No one can force anyone to love, but no one teaches how to let go either." And an agreement was made, not with a document, but with a quiet meeting between those who didn't know how to smile. Hermes took the minutes. Athena kept the time. Apollo held the light because the sun needed to witness the promise. Demeter didn't sign. She just bowed her head. Persephone said nothing. But she raised her hand, as if measuring herself between two worlds. Zeus stood in the back, saying a line that sounded memorized. "We agree, because there is no kinder choice." Persephone would stay on Earth 2/3 of the year, when spring, summer, and fall bloom, and go to the underworld 1/3 when winter comes, the Earth mourns, and Demeter misses her child. No one was completely happy. No one stayed forever sad. But that's how the seasons were born, from a longing just deep enough to change the color of the world. And when the first spring returned, no one was ready. The old farmer cried when he saw the first green sprout break the soil. A little girl removed a stone from the dry ground and found a daisy waiting from a past life. The birds sang out of tune, as if they had forgotten all their lyrics, and then relearned them. A mother hugged her child, whispering, "Spring is here, my dear." And the child replied, because that mother found her child again. No one answered, but a soft wind blew through, carrying the scent of fresh grass, warm water, and a thank you that didn't need a proper address. They say Eleusis was once just a small village by the hill, until a strange old woman appeared. She didn't ask for money. She didn't tell stories. She just sat by the well and stared at the water. The children in the village whispered to each other, "She's waiting for someone from the bottom of the well." The adults murmured, "Maybe she's a goddess." But she only smiled, and that smile made wheat grow around the well. Once, when a poor family invited her for dinner, she quietly looked at the newborn baby in the cradle. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, she placed the baby into the dying hearth, not to burn, but to forge. Every night she did this, and every morning the child grew stronger, eyes brighter, never crying. Until one night, the baby's mother woke up, saw what was happening, and screamed in horror. The old woman stood up, brushed ash off her hands, looked at the young mother and said, "I'm not hurting him. I'm trying to help him never have to die." And then she vanished. But the fire still remained in the hearth, and in the baby's eyes was the gaze of someone who once lost a child. They say Eleusis was once just a small village by the hill, until a strange old woman appeared. She didn't ask for money. She didn't tell stories. She just sat by the well and stared at the water. The children in the village whispered to each other, "She's waiting for someone from the bottom of the well." The adults murmured, "Maybe she's a goddess," but she only smiled, and that smile made wheat grow around the well. Then one day, she helped a poor family, not with magic, but by teaching them how to dry rice without mold, how to bury seeds on the right night when the moon rises, how to pray, not to beg, but to remember that they're still alive. They asked her what her name was. She replied, "Just call me the one who remembers her child." Later, when people found out she was Demeter, they built a temple, not to worship a goddess, but to thank a mother for choosing to stay. Eleusis became the first place to understand that gods also need a home to grieve, also need a well to sit beside and watch time flow at the bottom. And that's where the Eleusinian mysteries began. Not to pray for fertile lands, but to learn how to survive through seasons when no prayer is answered. No one knows exactly what the rituals included, because those who entered had to swear never to speak of them. No writing, no speaking, no drawing. But rumors said, after the Eleusinian rites, those who came out were no longer afraid of death, not because they understood something grand, but because they learned something small. That loss, when faced directly and shared, was no longer a black hole. It was fertilizer for the next season, for a new hope, growing from something that had already dissolved. The people of Eleusis, those who first heard the well echo at night, began to gather around her, not to beg for wheat, not to pray for rain, but to speak of things they were too afraid to carry alone. A mother who lost her child, a husband who couldn't harvest because his arm broke in the war, a child abandoned at birth, with no one to call their name when coughing. They sat around the well, where the old woman still looked down without a word, and then they began to plant seeds, not in the earth, but in their stories. Demeter didn't comfort, she just listened, and through that, they survived, not through winter, but through sorrow. When the next season came, some people in the village left. They brought with them seeds. They brought with them a promise. They brought with them the story of the one who remembers her child and how she turned grief into bread. They traveled to other lands, recreated the rites from memory, not from books. Each place had its own way of telling, but all began with, once upon a time, there was an old woman sitting by a well. And so, Eleusis spread not by armies, but by people who knew how to plant longing into the soil. Later, when the Romans copied the legend, they spoke of Eleusis as a lofty rite, full of codes, hierarchy, and order, but the people of Eleusis still remembered. It began with a mother who missed her child, with an old woman who looked into a well, saying nothing, and the things left unsaid lived longer than temples, bronze statues, or scrolls, because people can burn books, but they cannot burn longing. Not all miracles come in light. And not everyone understands a mother trying to save what she lost, at all costs. Demeter, in the form of a weathered old woman, was once taken in by a poor family in Eleusis to repay them. She didn't leave gold or treasure. She chose a child. That child, the youngest son of the household, often cried at night. Demeter held him without cooing. She quietly wrapped him in a cloth and placed him into the dying hearth fire. Not to burn, but to forge, like one would do with a divine sword. Every night, she did this, every morning. The child's skin glowed, free of illness, never startled by night terrors, until one night, the mother woke and saw this scene. A strange old woman, the hearth, and her child, lying in the glowing ashes. A scream tore through Eleusis like a smokeless fire. Panic spread across rooftops like wildfire. Demeter rose, brushed ash from her hands, not angry, just so sorrowful you could smell dried grass in midsummer. She said, "I'm not harming him. I'm helping him become something death can't find. But humans don't understand that they only saw the hearth and an old woman roasting their child. Demeter left, not in rage, just faded like the tired shadow of something no longer believed. If Prometheus was chained for giving fire, then Demeter, for fire too, was pushed into silence, not arrested, not punished, just ignored by those she once tried to preserve the most sacred thing for, longevity. She said nothing upon leaving Eleusis, just walked slowly, the fire in her eyes dimming. Even at the village gate, she turned once, not to look at people, but to tell the fire, don't burn for them anymore if they don't want to be warm. Years later, that child, now a quiet old man on the edge of the village, still kept a handful of hearth ash in a small wooden box. Each time he opened it, he'd smile and say to his grandchildren, "The fire didn't burn me. It kept me." He never told much, only once, when someone asked, "Do you remember her face?" He shook his head. "Not clearly. I only remember the smell of her robe, like sun-dried hay, and the crackling of wood like a heartbeat, slowing down when you're no longer afraid." Then he'd go silent, as if still listening to something. From afar, they say that after that night, fires in the homes of Eleusis never burned as brightly again. And in the eyes of that once child, now grown, there was always a look as if searching for someone through the dust of memory. No one knew if that child became a god, only that he outlived 3 generations, and whenever someone asked, "Why aren't you afraid of death?" he'd just smile and say, "Because I was once wrapped in fire by another mother." The story spread like a half-forbidden tale. The next day, villagers of Eleusis stood in little groups, endlessly gossiping. "She's gone." Took with her the ash that was a person just yesterday. An old woman kneading bread muttered, "I saw wheat sprouting right outside my window, right where she stood." A child drew on a dirt wall the figure of a woman with a shawl, and somehow added flames. The village blacksmith, chewing dried mint leaves, hissed, "She wasn't ordinary. She wrapped that child like forging iron. You're fools to fear her." Then the very wife of the man whose child was roasted by Demeter, after 3 days of silence, whispered, "She was like a mother, but not to me, to my child." From that point, no one called her a witch again, only the one who came and didn't stay. Some called her a witch, others a goddess, but no one dared mention this, that miracles only happen when pain is forged through fire, and sometimes the thing that seems most dangerous is the only way to protect. Since then, every year on that exact night, the people of Eleusis let the hearth fire burn low. No cooking, no heating, just sitting and remembering a woman who was once cursed for loving a child not her own. Some houses scatter old ash around the stove. Some place a charred blade of grass into the brick cracks. No one tells anyone to, but they do it as if, afraid the fire might forget, because if no one remembers, will fire one day refuse to burn for those truly cold? And from that silent ritual, something strange grew. Years later, the descendant of that child became the founder of the Eleusinian mysteries, not with trumpets, not by divine order, but with a whisper. There are things that shouldn't be spoken because they are written in fire. The ritual began with extinguishing all torches. Then, one by one, people entered the sealed room. No questions, no stories, just closed eyes and a hand pressed to cooled ash. No one knows exactly what happened inside that ritual, only that they came out, changed, as if they had touched something once sacred and once rejected. Some loves begin with a smile, others with a kidnapping and a piece of fruit. Persephone, the girl of spring, daughter of Demeter, was taken underground by Hades, god of the underworld. No flowers, no sunlight, no soft afternoon, only darkness, and a god so lonely he built a garden in hell. Persephone didn't cry, didn't argue. She just sat still, as if someone had frozen March in a jar. Hades, who had never been truly loved, didn't know what to do. He planted pomegranates, baked with his own hands, watered the plants himself. The water came from the river of death, but he tried, but still, she remained silent. Then one day, she walked past the garden. A pomegranate was ripe, split open as if it sensed this was a moment of fate. She stopped, looked around, and ate. She didn't eat out of hunger, not out of force, but because it was the only thing in this place, with color, a red pomegranate, as bright as fresh blood, in a sorrowful garden. And in that moment, Persephone didn't think of consequences. She just wanted to feel something still alive, in a place full of dead memories. One bite, like a silent protest, no shouting, but deep enough to make history change its color. No one knew why. Only this. It was the first and only pomegranate seed she bit. From that moment, the rule was rewritten. Whoever eats from the underworld belongs to the underworld. Demeter heard the news. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She simply stood and walked silently into the fields. Her fingers touched the soil, and the ground cracked. Not from magic, but from a silence heavy as stone. Wheat stopped growing. Sprouts curled back. Winds changed their path. For the first time, a goddess wasn't angry. She was just sad. They asked Hermes if there was an exception. Hermes looked at the law book, then at her, like he wanted to hide in a haystack. There wasn't. One pomegranate seed was enough. One trace of sweetness, forever. No one blamed Persephone, but she wasn't whole anymore either. Part of her heart now belonged to a land without dawn, and for the first time, she felt divided. Up there, memories of grain-scented fields, her mother's distant voice, smiles from past seasons. Down here, stillness, unspoken glances, and a garden grown from loneliness. Sometimes, she sat alone in the darkest corner of the garden, not speaking, just whispering to herself. If I hadn't eaten that seed, would anyone remember I was ever here? If I choose to return, would Mother forgive the part of me that stayed behind? Questions no one answered. And Persephone, though a goddess, could find no words. Only the echo of her own questions, like dust drifting between two worlds not facing the same way. She didn't hate Hades, nor did she love him. She just felt like a pomegranate, once whole, now cracked open, and never able to close again. Hades, from a distance, watched her, not happy, not sad, just knowing, sometimes, what binds people isn't chains, but a choice they didn't know they were making. He didn't cheer when she ate, just quietly left the garden, like someone who knew he'd just won a losing battle. He sat by the river Lethe, traced circles in the stone with his fingers, and wondered if she ate the fruit out of loneliness, then was he the one who filled that loneliness, or the one who caused it? The world changed. Persephone now split the year in two. When she returned to the surface, flowers bloomed out of season. When she descended, trees dropped their leaves as if mourning. And so, the seasons were born. From the divided heart of a mother and daughter, and a love that didn't know how to love the right way. From that day on, Hermes, the soul guide, began adding one more warning before anyone crossed the gates below. If there's food, don't eat it, especially if it's red. The village children repeated that warning to each other. Over time, it became the unwritten law of death. Don't touch food where there is no sun. Don't bite anything that grows from memory. And above all, never believe a pomegranate is harmless. Zeus didn't go down to the underworld. Zeus didn't plant pomegranates, didn't comfort kids with pastries, didn't cry by the Lethe River. Zeus, like every big boss, only showed up when it was time to sign paperwork. And this time, it really was. The world was wilting. Crops stopped growing. Mortals started complaining there was no bread left to offer the gods. Temples sat empty because everyone was starving. Zeus looked at the reports, sighed. Demeter's not working anymore. Hermes nodded. She declared unpaid leave until her daughter returns. Zeus scratched his head. I'm the supreme god, but when a mum gets mad, I lose. After 3 days of discussion, while mortals continued starving, Zeus called for a meeting. Hades, Demeter, and Hermes, all sitting around a stone table, where every chair made your back hurt and your mood worse. The air in the room was thick like porridge that hasn't been stirred. Hermes crossed his legs, tablet in hand, eyes praying no one would raise their voice. Demeter folded her arms, not from the cold, but because if she unfolded them, she might throw something. Hades, still in his ashy robe, stared into space like he was taking a final exam he didn't study for. Zeus sat in the center, like a dad at an accidental family therapy session. And like always, he arrived late, brought nothing but a know-it-all tone and a face that was equal parts sleepy and powerful. Demeter didn't bother looking at Hades. Hades kept staring at the table, as if counting wood grain. Zeus cleared his throat. Here's the thing. I propose a deal. Both looked up, with the expression, please don't joke right now, old man. Zeus raised a hand, drew a circle in the air, very theatrically. Since Persephone ate a pomegranate seed, by law, she belongs to the underworld. Demeter clenched her teeth, but to ensure cosmic balance and motherly love, Zeus added, voice as soft as someone who owes you money. I propose she'll split the year in two, 6 months below, 6 months above, Hades raised an eyebrow. 6 months for one seed. Zeus shrugged. Maybe she took a big bite. No one laughed. Hades cleared his throat. For the first time in the meeting, he looked up and said, Persephone wasn't forced. She had a choice. I just want that said. Zeus raised a hand to cut him off. The issue here isn't free will. The issue is offerings. He pulled out a stat sheet. Hermes handed it over. In the last 3 weeks, honey cake offerings dropped 74%. White sheep sacrifices down 60%. And the number of prayers is falling off a cliff. Hermes nodded and added, some places are even substituting offerings with hay. Zeus nodded solemnly. No one wants that. Not me. Not her. Not the people who are about to eat their own shoes. Before replying, Demeter closed her eyes. For a moment, she saw her little daughter again, Persephone sitting in the wheat fields, giggling while sneaking a bite of wildflower. Mom, what happens if I eat this? She once held her and said, you can eat anything, just don't let someone use it to chain you. And now, a single pomegranate seed, a piece of bright red fruit, was trying to hold her daughter forever. Demeter asked, what if I say no? Zeus replied, then mortals starve. No one left to worship us. And I really like being worshipped. That was when everyone went silent, not because they agreed, but because there were no other choices. Hermes rewrote the law with a goose feather, on stone, and sighed. Another god-tier clause, vague, emotional, and entirely based on personal feelings. If you think Demeter only had Persephone, then you're way off. She was the most multitasking mum on Olympus, with a complicated, colourful family and stories that make you laugh and sigh at the same time. There was a daughter of Demeter that few people know about, named Despoina. She always veiled her face in shadow, a mysterious figure in ancient rituals, secretly worshipped in some rural parts of Greece. Despoina's power was deeply connected to the mysteries of the harvest, fertility, and survival. She was like a reminder that not all divine things reveal themselves in the light. Alongside Despoina, Demeter also had a divine horse named Arion, a mythical steed faster than the wind. He was the companion of legendary heroes, beloved, and the object of more than a little divine envy. Arion was not only a symbol of speed and strength, but also of loyalty and an unyielding warrior spirit. Philomelos, one of Demeter's sons, was famous for teaching humans how to plough the fields. But sadly, his death was tragic and a little ridiculous. He was opposed by traditionalists who rejected innovation in agriculture and was murdered while trying to carry out his mission. Philomelos' story is a profound lesson on resistance to change and the harsh rigidity of ancient society. Philomelos' brother was Plutus, the god of wealth, who was blind. His blindness was not just misfortune, but a symbol of how wealth is not always seen clearly, or sometimes even invisible to the human eye. This reflects the Greek belief about fortune, prosperity, and the importance of gratitude and trust in life. Demeter also had other lesser-known children with the lord Carmana on the island of Crete. Eubuleus and Chrysothemis, a boy and a girl, were mysterious figures who contributed to the rich mythology surrounding Demeter. Their stories connect myth with history and local tradition, expanding the agricultural goddess's influence across the Greek world. Through these unofficial children, you start to see that Demeter wasn't just an ordinary agricultural goddess. She was a complex, multi-dimensional mother and the center of a vast mythological system with countless strange, deeply human stories. These stories are the lifeblood of the harvest, of life, death, and rebirth, the very themes that will continue to show up in the chapters to come. The story of Demeter is not just about children or the battle with fate. It is also a story about lovers, about those who are forgotten, and about a field bathed in sunlight, yet drenched in loneliness, where everything begins and ends. Poseidon, Zeus's brother and god of the sea, once had to transform into a white horse to approach Demeter, the image of a mighty sea god. Now a horse with a flowing mane standing beside a wheat field makes anyone who hears it chuckle. But that love gave birth to extraordinary children. Despoina, the mysterious daughter who always veils her face in darkness, and Arion, the divine horse swift as the wind, companion to heroes. Each lover, each love story left a deep mark, helping to weave the diverse and colorful mythologies surrounding Demeter. As time passed, people began to forget how to place their faith in Demeter. They forgot the rituals, forgot the importance of the land, of the harvest. Villages grew silent, fields barren without the sound of plows or songs. The once glorious temples now stood cold and empty. This forgetting was like a quiet curse spreading across the land. Where the fields died, memory faded. It was a painful lesson in the power of forgetting and the consequences of losing connection with one's roots. Somewhere among the radiant golden fields, there is a patch of land no one sows, a lonely field where time seems to stop, where Demeter once cried for her lost child, where memory, grief, and hope intertwine. It is where all stories, all miracles of life and death converge. It is the heart of the land, where everything begins and ends, in solitude, yet full of life. Demeter's story, therefore, is not just a legend about the goddess of agriculture. It is a story of complex love, of sorrowful forgetting, and of the power of resilience in loneliness. On her journey, Demeter did not only bring life and abundant harvests, she was also tied to deeply symbolic images, among them the poppy flower, a symbol of sleep, of rest, and sometimes of death. The poppy is not an ordinary flower. It grows wild in fields, on lands still stained with the blood of war, and even on the graves of the departed. Its brilliant red color lights a peaceful flame in the darkness, but it's also a reminder of the fragility and impermanence of life. Demeter loved the poppy because it was a reflection of herself, a goddess who nurtured life but also understood the necessity of sleep and rest. The sleep of the earth is when everything pauses, so it can later awaken stronger. There's a little-known myth about Mekon, a mortal so beautiful that even Demeter had to stop. Unlike Zeus's stormy affairs or Hades' kidnappings, the love between Demeter and Mekon was as gentle as an autumn afternoon. No rush, no demands, just presence. He lived in Athens, grew wheat, and sang every morning, his voice like a wake-up call for the seeds. Demeter would often come to listen, hiding behind the wheat stalks, and sometimes leave behind a soft rain as a gift. Then, a tragedy came as swiftly as an out-of-season wind. Macon died young. Demeter was so heartbroken she didn't want the sun to rise the next day. She held his body, laid it on the ground, and whispered something in a language only gods and Mother Earth could understand. And there, for the first time, bloomed a vibrant red flower, the poppy, soft as his lips, radiant as the cheeks that once smiled every time the wheat blossomed. From then on, the poppy became a symbol of gentle sleep, like Meccan resting peacefully, while Demeter kept watch. More than a personal story. The poppy also became a sign of the earth's strange healing power. People said that after great wars, when fields were reduced to ash and scattered bones, the poppy was the first to grow again, as if Demeter were whispering to the soil, "Rest now, and I will teach you how to live again." There were places no one dared to walk because of war's ghosts. Yet poppies grew thick like a cushion, red as a silent beating heart. They were lullabies for the earth, for the dead, and even for the living who were too tired to go on. Demeter didn't need to go to the battlefield. She just sent tiny seeds so that even after nightfall, something soft would bloom among the ruins during long winter nights, when Demeter felt sorrow because Persephone was still in the underworld. Fields of poppies bloomed everywhere. They were signs of the earth's deep sleep, but also a promise of the spring to come. Another myth tells that Demeter once sowed poppies along the paths Persephone used to walk, not for decoration, but to count. Each flower was a day away from her daughter. When winter dragged on, Demeter would walk the field, look at each bud, and whisper, "Day 87, my daughter." The red petals became a calendar of longing. No numbers, no months, just red and memory. Some believe that rows of blooming poppies are actually the memory map of a mother's love, stretching endlessly. There's a tale where Demeter gave a bouquet of poppies to weary farmers. "Take this," she said, "so when you're tired, sleep like the flower, peacefully, and let everything keep going." The poppy is a symbol of pause, not just for the land, but for the soul. That sleep helps the world recover, ready for a new cycle. And that's why, every time you see a bright red poppy, remember Demeter, the goddess of harvest, of peaceful sleep for the earth, the one who keeps life and death in balance, in nature's endless circle. There's something strange mortals often forget. Gods have hearts too. It's just that their heartbeats stretch over centuries, and their pain smoulders like lava, burning inside. But on the outside, everyone just thinks, "Oh, she's strong." Demeter is a god, an ancient goddess, powerful, carved into statues, offered rituals, prayed to every harvest. But deep inside, she's also a mother who had her only child taken from her, not by fate, but by her former husband, in collusion with his gloomy brother from beneath the earth. Centuries passed, and people speak of Demeter as a symbol of abundance. Forgetting she once withered, people eat their bread every morning without remembering the cost. Tears, not the tears of farmers, but of a goddess who once screamed across an empty field, calling for her child with no answer. Once, Hermes, the messenger god, often stuck in the middle of Olympus family feuds, whispered, "Do you want me to say something for you?" Demeter just shook her head. No one's listening. They only want the crops to grow. In Eleusis, where she once lived disguised as an old woman, the elders said she used to sit silently, staring at the earth. She didn't speak, but we knew she was furious. It was the kind of divine anger. No smashing, no curses, just one look away, and a fertile valley turns to stone. Despoina, the hidden daughter. Not everyone knows. Persephone wasn't Demeter's only child. She had another daughter, Despoina, born from a moment between Demeter and Poseidon, during a haze of rage, escape, and confusion. Despoina wasn't like anyone on Olympus. She lived in hiding, not loudly worshipped, absent from harvest festivals. Only some shepherds in Arcadia whispered that they'd seen her walking out of the mist through the woods, with a face sterner than Athena's. Demeter didn't talk much about Despoina, but sometimes, sitting alone in her shrine, her hand would move through strands of straw and whisper a different name. A name no one heard clearly. A name only the earth knew. Despoina was the memory Demeter buried deeper than the pain of losing Persephone. Because she wasn't stolen. She was hidden. Demeter didn't dare show Despoina to the world, afraid that again, someone might take her. Not all sorrow is loud. Some wounds are simply labeled secret. But if one day you see a field with only wind and no people, listen closer. That might be where Despoina once passed, and Demeter, in her quiet loneliness, left behind a silent greeting for the daughter the world never knew. The unsent letter. Demeter once wrote a message for Persephone. Not everyone knows. Demeter once wrote a letter to Persephone, not with ink, not on paper, but with weeds and early morning wind. Each sentence was a row of flattened wheat, each period a sigh from the earth. "My dear," the first line wrote, "if you can read this, it means you're still walking above ground. Step gently, because my heart lies somewhere beneath your feet." The letter was never sent. Not because there was no messenger. Hermes was always ready, but because Demeter wasn't sure if Persephone still needed to hear it. Or, more terrifying, Demeter herself didn't dare hear it again. She folded the letter, tucked it inside a poppy flower, then let it drift in the wind, hoping someday someone sitting in a field might pick that flower and hear the whisper of a goddess who once loved too much. But even a goddess needs to be heard, not as a bestower of blessings, but as a being who knows pain, sorrow, and overwhelming love. The only difference is, when they're sad, the whole planet suffers. Once, Zeus threw a party. Demeter didn't come. Zeus sent invitations once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th, she sent back a single poppy with a short note. Busy crying. The whole feast went silent. Apollo stopped playing. Dionysus stopped drinking. And Hera let out a long sigh. Since then, they always leave one empty chair at meetings, not because someone is missing, but because some divine sadness needs to be respected. Demeter didn't need comforting words. She just needed long enough silence for her feelings not to be swept away like a passing breeze. And one day when Persephone returned, Demeter said nothing, just smiled very softly, and spring began. No fireworks, no fanfare, just the earth softening, wheat sprouting, and people saying again, "Oh, the goddess Demeter is so great." No one knew that sometimes all she really needed was a small question. "Are you okay?" There are reunions that need no music, just a single touch, and the earth softens. The day Persephone returned to Olympus, no one spoke loudly, no triumphant anthem, just the wheat fields, dry and brittle, suddenly stretching upward, bursting into the tiniest green sprout, and the rain, no drums, fell quietly, as if the sky finally exhaled. Demeter didn't run out to greet her daughter. She just stood still, hand still clutching a bundle of dry straw she hadn't let go of all winter. Persephone walked toward her, slowly, because the winter wind still clung to her heels. "How many pomegranate seeds did you eat?" Demeter asked. Not angry, not trembling. Persephone said nothing, then slowly raised 3 fingers. Demeter nodded. Then 3 months. No one hugged anyone. Just that. The peach tree behind the shrine bloomed its first flower. Leaves began to fall, to grow again, and the whole world started to remember. Ah, so green isn't guaranteed. Turns out, for a sprout to break the soil, it might take a word of forgiveness. Zeus, of course, declared that the whole farewell reunion plan was his grand strategy. Hermes bit his lip and said nothing. Hera just snorted. Hades, sipping pomegranate tea in the underworld, let out a soft sigh. No one knew if it was regret, acceptance, or love, in that quiet kind of way no one dares to name. Since then, humans have had 4 seasons, 3 months of winter, when Persephone stays with Hades, and Demeter withdraws in silence, 3 months of spring, when she returns, and the earth breathes like it was never wounded, 3 months of summer, when mother and daughter plant together, and laughter cracks open under the sun. 3 months of autumn, when they slow down, to prepare to part, again. Every year, it repeats. And people, from Athens to Arcadia, call it natural order. Only Demeter knows. It's motherhood, forced into an agricultural calendar. One morning, when the wind just shifted, a child asked their mother, "Mom, why is there winter?" The mother smiled, because a divine mother once grieved so deeply, nothing could grow. The child's eyes widened. "So who makes spring?" The mother placed her hand on the child's heart. It's when that mother saw her daughter return, and together, with just a glance, they made the whole world bloom again. You don't have to be a god to bring a piece of land back to life. You just need to love someone enough. And so, Demeter sat down, in the middle of the golden wheat field, said nothing. Persephone smiled, and the cool breeze returned. When the rice flowers bloom, no one hears a sound. But Demeter knows, because it's the earth's softest sigh, when longing turns into grain. Some seasons don't begin with rain. They begin with a small smile from a mother who sees the silhouette of her child from afar, blurry in the sunlight, mixed with the wind, yet still recognized, not because she sees the face clearly, but because her heart recognizes it first. Demeter once lost her child, then got her back, then lost her again, then had to share her. And so, each year, with each turning season, is one more time to remember, one more time to forget, one more time to begin again. And the earth, like a mother's heart, never refuses. As long as someone is willing to plant the seed, no one calls Demeter great because of her power. People love her because she taught the world that to grow is not just instinct, but faith. Faith that if you care, if you wait, if you don't give up, what was lost can grow again. No one lulls the earth to sleep like she does. No one makes the grass grow with such quiet whispers. And no one knows better. Each stalk of grain is a child you must learn to let go of at the right time. So if one night you hear the wind whispering through the rice fields, if you see a flower blooming through snow, if you suddenly miss your mother and don't know why, it might be Demeter passing by. She carries no miracles, only a short lullaby. Grow up, come back, and if you can't yet, I'll wait another season. And the world, no matter how many times it breaks, can still grow again because of a mother who never stopped waiting.